Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Global Footballer Podcast. I'm Monish and with me is Deepak. Today we discuss about Newcastle United. Deepak being a Newcastle United super fan wants, I think, shed some light on Newcastle's recent travails. Just, I think, 3 or 4 points from the last 15 that they could have gotten in the Premier League. What do you think is happening at Newcastle? I know they really were looking for at least trying to get a cup win in the League Cup. Out of Champions League, in unlucky circumstances, I would say also a bit of lack of experience in that sense. But yeah, so what do you think, Deepak?
Yeah, I think the Champions League, you're absolutely spot on, Manish. It was a mix of not having enough experience and quite unlucky circumstances. But the League Cup exit was, we were 1 minute away from semi-finals of the League Cup, and Trippier, of all people, made a horrible mistake, which ended up costing us that game. But overall, I don't think those are the biggest problems. The problems have been after the win against Fulham and then coming back into the league. We lost against Luton, Nottingham Forest, and then now Liverpool. Liverpool, fine. It's okay. Most people who go to Anfield end up getting smashed anyway, so I don't really have a problem with that. But the Luton and Nottingham Forest games are really bad, especially because that winning those would have changed the trajectory of a season massively. We would have been 2 points off Man City, but losing that puts us right in the middle of the pack, fighting with a lot of other teams for finishing in top 10. And more concerning than just the wins has been how fatigued the players look, how easy it has been to counter us. And it's been Nottingham Forest just played the perfect game for that. They just stayed back the whole game and took their opportunities countering us. We just look so open in the middle of the park. Dan Burn, after coming back from injuries, just does not look like the Dan Burn who was injured before, well, like who was a player before injury. Center defensive midfield, there's nobody there. Bruno keeps wandering around. Um, I just don't know. There doesn't seem to be a structure to the team that was there before. The structure also came from the front three putting in a high press with that intensity is our identity mantra. But they just look so fatigued. They can't do the press as effectively as they used to before,
Do
which
you
puts
think
pressure
even
on the
Trippier's
midfield.
mistake or all the individual errors that are coming in are also because of the lack of the intensity problem, the fact that someone just asked recently, I mean there's a question about is Newcastle really getting too intense and that's becoming a problem, which I think you kind of agree with, because sometimes you have to just probably strategize looking at how
Yeah,
fit your players are and how fatigued they are. More
I
importantly,
agree.
the
I
fact
think
that
it.
Trippier has been playing so much football that he was
Yeah.
prone to finally make some mistake or the other. And it's not like you didn't have players. I mean, that's one position where you probably had a very good backup.
Backup. Yeah.
Was he fit then? I mean,
But
Livramento.
the problem with Trippier playing a lot was Livramento ended up going to left back because he had to cover Dan Burn, who got injured at the same time,
Okay.
and Lewis Hall had not been up to match sharpness to play that left back role. But that's why Trippier did not get substituted, or Livramento did not play enough for Trippier, and Trippier ended up playing himself into the ground. Like, he's 34 now almost, and we have to look after him. He can't play at this high level. He was the Premier League right back of the season last year, but that was just because he was playing in the Premier League. You can't expect him to put that level of performances competing on three different fronts when he's 34. You will have to give him a break every now and then. And that's what's happened with Trippier. And centre backs, Botman come back from with an injury, which was an ACL tear, supposedly, and he ended up not having surgery um, because that would have ruled him out for the whole season. And now that he's back from injury, he doesn't look like the same person he was before. Shar had a hamstring injury, has come back, pushed in way too early. He doesn't look like he has the you know pace about him that he had before. And Dan Burn had three broken vertebrae in his spine with that fall, and he was supposed to come back somewhere near February. He was rushed in mid-December because we didn't have enough people around. and he just looks so out of sorts that it's a joke. I tweeted out before the Liverpool match that Salah against Burn is going to be an unfair advantage to Salah. He's already a great footballer, and you're putting him up against in great form against Dan Burn. It wasn't going to end well, and it did not end well. Um, our defense is completely decimated. As you probably remember, last year we were one of the best defenses in the league. Actually, joint least goals conceded, together with Man City in the league last season. And from there, the injuries have just decimated the squad, and Trippier's form in the last few weeks or months has not been helpful at all. Um, but I think more concerning has been the midfield, probably, because there just doesn't seem any protection for that back four. Because Eddie Howe has not played with protection to the back four. The back four were capable of looking after themselves, and the front press meant that the midfield had to push on with them, which meant we couldn't put in a number six because that will leave a gap, and we had to play a flat three to support the front press. But now the front, um, uh, all three of them, Almiron, Isaac, and Gordon, are played so many minutes that they are fatigued, and Wilson, who's made of glass, seems to be injured every 2 weeks. So, which means every team is hitting us on the counter, like it's schoolboy football almost. Sometimes I feel like, because it's so easy to rip us apart because everybody knows there's no press coming and the midfield is so vacant. It's very difficult to see. I don't know.
But
What do you
I
think?
think, see, all these problems that Newcastle United are facing, these were problems that probably we were discussing to a certain extent. I was pointing it out that this is not sustainable. Even you mentioned that you have a very small squad and this is going to be very difficult. Those were heroic performances, but in the end run, I mean, you can do these heroic performances at the end of the season, because you're going to have a rest at the end. If your players are playing injured and somehow playing with one leg and trying to eke out games and wins because it improves your league position in April, in May, it's fine. Even in March, it's okay. But doing it in October, and your players were expected in February, like you just mentioned, most of them like big injuries like ACL trays and vertebral fractures and all of that, and now you are forced to rush them in. It's also that's where the problem is as well.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I agree with you there.
losing Tonali was not under your control. The injuries are never under your control. But then keeping the players that are not injured and trying and playing them at full intensity. I understand the style, but then
No, I
maybe
agree
at
with I
times
agree with you completely. I don't think that we should have changed the style because honestly, if you
I
keep
understand the
changing the
style,
style, the team loses identity, team
but
gets
you sub in
confused.
the
But
players,
yeah,
and
you're very right in saying the squad rotation should have been far better. And
it
the
could have
squad
been.
rotation, he does not use under 20 players. And in an injury crisis, most teams rely on under 20 players. I think Manchester United yourselves have used a lot of under 20 players, haven't
And
you,
that's
to
how we
fill the.
found some of our really good players as well, by
Yeah,
putting
no,
in by
even
blooding in
even
these under 20
even in
players.
our case, the one under 20 player we have used consistently has been Louis Smiley, who has been excellent actually, given the circumstances that he's played, and he's filled the role to the level
But
that a 17-year-old can be expected
but
to do, and even
also,
more.
if I'm not wrong, aren't there a few signings that have not been playing as much as they could
Louis
be?
Hall, only one, but Louis Hall
Yeah,
is the predominant one. Matt
yeah.
Ritchie has been getting uh, a lot of
Not
playing time
as
above Louis Hall, but Matt Ritchie has no legs to give. His contract ran out last
how
season. He
how
was
old
just
is Matt Ritchie again?
he's 34.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I still remember him be playing for some other. I mean, was he playing for Newcastle then,
Bournemouth.
or was it Bournemouth? Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
vaguely remember him.
he's not
Why?
been able to put
So
in a full
what is the
shift for
problem
a while
with?
now.
So what is the problem with Lewis Hall not playing?
So again, Eddie Howe keeps saying he's not ready, but I have no idea what his metrics for being ready are. Surely he's better than a 35-year-old Matt Ritchie who can't really run to complete half a game. And I think honestly, Eddie Howe, from just going through the grapevine on social media, the problem with Lewis Hall is I think he thinks he's not mentally tough enough to receive criticism from any mistakes that might happen, and he doesn't put him into high pressure environments, ends up just coming at the end of matches for 5-10 minutes. Honestly,
You know,
he, which is
that
not a good
just
excuse at all.
no,
He's a
it isn't.
teenager at the end of the day. I agree, he's a teenager, but we bought him for a significant fee um,
Exactly.
in summer, and he has to be played. And even if he wasn't giving in great performances from left back, he would have given the likes of Gordon um, a rest, some sort of rest
Exact.
in his legs. You remember how
Totally,
Gordon
because
was in such good form. He was Premier League Player
yes.
of the Month couple of months back. So, like hitting goals from everywhere, opening up defenses. Now he's played so much football and not even been substituted in most games that he just again has played himself into the ground, and we've taken off one of our best players because of that.
No, that's exactly what's happening. And unless Eddie Howe starts rotating players, even if you're using a player who's 70% of the previous player, it's important to give this rest to players. I mean,
Yeah.
you cannot, even with a high pressing system, like Liverpool had a high pressing system, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
When
this
they
is very
when
symptomatic
they
of what
had,
happened to Liverpool in that initial
but
gegenpressing years. But
yes, and then later they did have their peak, and then the players did get injured a little bit, and some of them got older and
yeah,
left. But they had a great peak for 2 years,
yeah,
and the thing that happened, like what he really had, was a good mix of experience. And he, one thing Jurgen Klopp did was use players out of position, especially. I mean, he mixed up his midfield and his left backs and right backs, and he managed it well.
yeah.
I mean, he needed
Jurgen Klopp
Salah, he needed
did this
Mane.
quite a few years actually before that. Even at Dortmund, he used to consistently, his players used to consistently burn out by the end of the season and have lots
Yeah.
of injuries. And he's lost multiple times because of that. He came to Liverpool, did the same thing again, they ended up burning out by the end of the season or mid-season.
Yes, but
But then he
there are
changed
two
his tactics. He
things.
realized that's not
Yeah,
sustainable in the long run.
and there are two things or three things that Jurgen Klopp always had. Like one thing, okay, he had the a few players he always, like, he got in Thiago Alcantara as well. I mean, he wanted some players to control the game, although it didn't work that way. After he went up front, he that see Thiago is definitely not a Jurgen Klopp kind of player, but he was looking at that. He was also looking at other styles of play. Okay, I go in, I play really hard, I score 2 goals, and then I need someone to control the midfield, so I can sit back and relax.
Yeah,
Who's a
you're
player I
right in
can put
that. I
in?
think Eddie Howe also
He
probably
did.
needs to open his eyes a bit more towards players he probably
After
wouldn't have
going 3
signed
nil up,
otherwise.
you don't need those players. You just
Yeah,
put
you
in
need a
everybody.
controller, or you need just honestly at this point we are screaming out for Calvin Phillips. He's ready to come. Man City are ready to sell him. We want to sign him, but we're hassling over the fee. That central defensive midfielder, he literally just plugged that role right now. We need. We are desperate for, but we haven't gotten that done. And it also brings us to this brewing problem now. There's a lot of chatter on social media that Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe have had a bit of a falling out. And the reason behind that is Ashworth has wanted to sign predominantly continental based players. And I think the success of Portman, Bruno Guimaraes, and Alexander Isak should leave a lot of credibility to that. Whereas Eddie Howe wants to sign mostly Premier League proven players. Now, there are Premier League proven players with Eddie Howe signed who have been successful as well. The likes of Gordon Byrne, Nick Pope have all been quite good
Now,
signings.
where was
But they
Lewis Hall signed from? May I ask? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a bit lost.
supposedly that's the Lewis Hall was signed from Chelsea, but Lewis Hall's problem was he was supposedly a Ashford signing. He wasn't a Eddie Howe signing,
Do you
and
think Calvin Phillips also is a similar problem? Do
I
you think
think
Eddie
there
Howe
might
doesn't
be
want him?
honestly, yeah, you're right
Because he
in that
doesn't
there
seem
might
like an Eddie
be.
Howe player at all.
Yeah, I think there
I
is
mean, he does
probably a
press a
lot
lot,
of
he runs a lot, but I mean, if Eddie Howe wanted him, Eddie Howe would have gotten him even before.
exactly. If he wanted him, he would have gotten him even at the beginning of the season. I think. Um,
Before Manchester City bought him. I mean, or I think
I
no,
think we
that
weren't
was
ready
before.
to
We weren't
invest then, but
ready to invest then.
yeah. Either way, I think if we wanted him, we would have gotten him. You're right. I don't think Eddie Howe really wants Calvin Phillips. I think he's being given Calvin Phillips from the hierarchy, possibly, or he's being given him as an option. Either way, I think they need to. sort themselves out. And I've been asking this question, and lots of Newcastle fans have been asking this question: in the long run, who is more important to the club? If it boils down to this, and I just
I,
don't know. I think Dan Ashworth as a club builder is so good, and the fact that Manchester United are sniffing around him shows how
I
much of a
think I agree,
potential he
but
has.
Deepak, you shouldn't be so fickle because a good coach is very, very, very difficult to
No, I
find.
agree. I agree
Trust
completely.
me, because Manchester United has been struggling with this for so long. We had a good coach in
Yeah.
Mourinho, and then there were problems later with the players because Mourinho is getting very old, cranky these days. But what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say, it's very difficult to have a good coach who brings a vision to the club, who the club can get behind. And
Hmm.
you were praising Eddie Howe just 2 months back,
No, I'm
and
still in
you
praising
shouldn't.
Eddie Howe. I will
I
100%
I
back him.
agree.
But this is
So
what, Monish,
don't.
when I was praising
just
him,
because
you stopped
just
me when
because I know.
when I'm.
Yeah,
So
but just
basically,
because he had a
I
few
like to
bad
give
games, you
people.
can't.
No, that's what. So I like to give people the plaudits they deserve and people the criticism they deserve. I'm just giving the criticism part now
No,
because there are
when you gave
certain
the
things
plaudits,
which he
I
deserves.
told you this is the possible problem that can happen. Now that you're criticizing, I'm
So
telling you he built the club. Remember that
that's what.
he
So
has a style of play, and how many
when I
coaches in the
said the
Premier League
profit.
have a style of play?
When I
There are
said the
four.
plaudits,
I'll
I
tell you.
prefaced, yeah. So when I said the plaudits, I prefaced it by saying this is not going to be permanent. He is going to have a run of form or run of dip in form, or things are going to go down. And I completely knew we will obviously hit a stumbling block at some point. It's not practical for any club to only have an upward trajectory. We will hit a stumbling block at some point. But my point is, when you hit a stumbling block, you criticize accordingly what is actually going wrong. When you're doing really well, you give all the praise that's needed. That's all I'm trying to do. I did give my praise, but right now I think there are a few things he needs
But
to address.
see, in the Premier League, as I mentioned, there are like four clubs where probably four or five managers who have managed to make the clubs play the way that they want them to completely. All right, one is Manchester City, well drilled.
Yep.
He's coaching them for what 6 8 years now. One is Liverpool under Jurgen
Yep.
Klopp. One is Arsenal. Then Unai Emery and Aston Villa. The fifth one comes close is Eddie Howe right now.
Yep.
Ange
I
has
would say Ange
been
and
winging
probably
it, doing
Brighton.
really Oh yeah, Brighton again. That's number six. Yeah, Ange, I still want to see more from him. I mean,
Yeah,
he's doing
probably
really well
too soon
with
to
the
say.
players with the players he has. But he seems more like a manager who can handle whatever he's given to him. He seems more
Yeah.
of that sort of
No,
manager, and that's the sort of
I
manager
am
I prefer.
by no way saying Eddie Howe out. Not even any figment of the imagination does this mean I want Eddie Howe out. Like, I'm nowhere close to that by any metric. But he needs to sort out these issues, and I think that is where we are going wrong. And we need to plug these major gaps that are happening in our midfield and on the left back position.
So it's clear like this. Eddie Howe is not going to suddenly start rotating players. He has to believe in it himself. What Newcastle United needs to do is probably have a bigger squad of very good players,
Yeah,
and
which will
that
take
takes
time,
time.
unfortunately. Yeah,
That takes a lot of time,
yeah.
and also players that he trusts. But if you want players that Eddie Howe trusts, it's going to be even more difficult because then
Yeah.
you need to give him
This
more
actually
control.
brings me to a question about FFP, Monish. I wonder what you think, because FFP was obviously put in place to prevent people from making ludicrous money and spending their way out of whatever issue or giving unfair competition to others. But does FFP also prevent competition? Because technically, the fact that FFP is there now means that I mean, Newcastle owners, as we've talked about, are probably the richest in world football. And with the spending that they have done in the Saudi Pro League, they're not shy of spending. So they can't do that spending in the Premier League or anywhere else because of the fact that you might get hurt by sanctions like what Everton received and what Man City potentially might receive. So does FFP prevent competition or new clubs? Tomorrow, imagine somebody striking over Brighton and wants to take them to the top of the Premier League. Is that practically possible?
No, what I said is the whole system is already flawed. About the FFP preventing new clubs going ahead. I mean, if Newcastle had been the one club that managed to, instead of Manchester City or instead of probably, Chelsea, if
Yeah.
Newcastle was the one bought and then now another club is trying, and then you would say FFP is good.
Yeah, no,
It's
obviously
how you look
it
at
is
it.
good for you if you are the top six because it prevents
Exactly.
further
No,
people from
no,
coming in. But
Not
Does it?
not because you're in the top six. If you have built already a viable fan base,
Yeah,
why
that's what.
Manchester
So
United still
does
has the
that?
money to, in spite of being overtly leveraged, why Manchester United still has money to buy players is because of the commercial product that they have been able to build
Yeah,
by
exactly.
peaking
So
at the
is it
right time. That
anti-competitive in
was,
nature, FFP?
I don't know, it's not FFP that's anti-competitive in nature. Football on the whole has become anti-competitive in nature. Whatever a club does, unless, I mean, the only way they can do is get in a buyer and put in oodles of money. There's no other way to come up right now. And to fix that, you need to do a
But
lot of things.
getting a buyer and spending oodles of money is also not possible now, is the point I was trying to make, because you'll get sanctioned and you'll lose points, and obviously nobody wants to do that, so nobody's going to spend that much.
What can possibly be done is, instead of having this commercial, like every club is making money on the side more than,
Mm,
I mean, okay, they're making some 45 million in Champions League or more than that, but it's the money that they get from commercial sponsorship, from commercial deals, that's making the money.
mm,
That is where Manchester United, Arsenal, Barcelona, Real Madrid, all these clubs, even Arsenal had a few really bad years, but they still had decent amount of money that they could still buy in a few players. Even when they were
yeah.
down and out, and everyone thought they were down and out, they got in Mesut Ozil, they got in Alexis Sanchez, so that helps them. Now, if you start saying that, okay, financial fair play has only been put in place to stop people coming and buying in the clubs and spending a ton load of money, because that's what happened with Chelsea, with Manchester City. Manchester City was, I mean, it was nowhere.
Yeah.
The whole
Biggest
club, the whole
example.
structure, exactly. So that was the biggest example. But that was already done and dusted. They didn't want 10 other Manchester cities to crop up.
Mm,
Now because it's happening to you, obviously you'll feel like, oh, this is going to stop. Yeah, it's going to stop. But as I said, when we're talking about the Super League, the whole idea, the whole way it's being done right now is flawed, and the top
mm,
six are not top six because of the way they play. That's, as I
mm.
told you, if
Yeah,
United finish 10th
exactly.
this season, if Manchester United finish 10th this season, next season they're still going to have 50 or 80 million dollars to spend
Yep,
to buy in
absolutely.
some big shot players and still come and do well.
Mm,
And a great coach will come and, I mean, a decently good coach will still want to coach them.
yep,
I would say, yeah, the best players are not coming, but we are still having decently good players.
yep, I agree. All right,
That
so
is the difference.
that's it for Newcastle United. Like, share, and subscribe, everybody, and thank you for tuning in.